enter and to get on stage on that song, that was a pretty good setup, Jason. Good morning, everyone. As Jason mentioned, my name is Lillian Ortega, and I'm with Chemular. I'm a regulatory consultant with Chemular, and former CTP Director of the Division of Enforcement and Manufacturing. So today I bring, with my presentation, a perspective where it's bridging the experience that I've had over a decade plus of experience with CTP, but also with the other centers as well, and kind of providing some advice and some guidance on the current landscape and when it comes to pre-market tobacco applications, but also how to build the PMTA strategy moving forward. And when I was approached about this topic, I know the environment that the industry is in. It's like there is it's a negative feeling with PMTAs as a whole. And so my approach with this presentation is not just to talk about the strategy, but to provide some advice, give some guidance, and maybe shed a little bit of optimism. And I know that is that is hard, but to show a little bit of, share a little bit of optimism of what we see in the future with PMTA, but understanding why a robust PMTA strategy is not just for your current situation where either if you've not submitted, you're preparing to submit, but it's also if you are currently under the PMTA review process. It's thinking about how do I continually, unfortunately, amend my PMTA to meet the regulatory requirements, the ever-changing regulatory requirements. And yes, I've heard a lot over the last year or so since my departure from FDA about the ever-changing regulatory requirements. And so I'll touch on that and provide some examples, but I'm hoping that the gems and the nuggets that I provide today are just not just for but it's also for your current situation, and also in the event that it doesn't work out as far as a negative decision, how a robust PMTA strategy can still work in your favor. So at a high level, because I know that we'll be talking about it throughout the morning, and people will mention it, I'll briefly give a high-level overview of the PMTA process, or not the process, but just what is a pre-market tobacco application, what is the statute and regulatory requirements for it, and the standard in which the FDA looks at these applications. I'll go over the 4 pillars, which I think are the 4 strong pillars to a PMTA strategy. It's legal, so for all my lawyers in the room, yes, legal comes first. It's scientific foundation, manufacturing, and so manufacturing is near and dear to my heart because that's what I've done for the last 7 years at FDA, and then marketing and how they all come together. It's a strategy that will hold and hopefully withstand the regulatory changes and within FDA's landscape. Try to give some tips along the way, and then also talk about how integrating these pillars is important for a sound strategy. So if you've not seen this graphic before, this is the graphic that FDA has on their website. And this is the expectation of what you submit into a PMTA. So what is the regulatory requirement for a PMTA? To legally market a product that was not on the market as of February 15, 2007, or substantially equivalent to a product that was on the market as of February 15, 2007, then you are a new tobacco product. And a new tobacco product would need to go through the pre-market tobacco application pathway. To legally market your product, not just submit the application, but to legally market your product, you need to have a marketing granted order. So what goes into a PMTA? And this is at a very high level. Product information. Describe your product, but not just how you see your product, because it could be, I've seen, just from my experience, I've seen where there are some applications that says my product is a good product, my product does well in the market. That's not what FDA is looking for as far as your product information. They want to know, describe your product. How do you use your product? Give me the ingredients of your product. Want to know if there are any risks with the product. You have to determine the risk that goes with your product and the use of your product. And it's not just for the user itself, it's the population as a whole. They want to know about clinical studies, specifically the abuse liability of your product. How do people perceive your product? How do people intend to use your product? These are specifically to the users, but then also how others perceive, non-users perceive your product. Manufacturing controls, and we'll delve into each of these a bit more deeply, but how do you make your product? They want to know exactly from raw ingredients all the way to the finished packaging product. How do you control all of those steps within your manufacturing process? And they want to know how you're going to market your product. They want a marketing plan for the first and the fifth year. How do you plan to market? How do you plan to make sure that you legally market this product and that your labeling, your advertising, all of that complies? And all of this in your PMTA is then reviewed by FDA, and they determine if your product is appropriate for the protection of public health. So what does that really mean? I will do my best to define it, but it is still a definition that even the agency has not clearly defined, as you can see with all of the decisions in the marketing denial orders. So it's different from medical devices and drugs, where we always hear safe and effective. You hear, is the drug safe and effective for its intended use? For tobacco products, it's gauged to the public health standard, and that is this product appropriate for the protection of public health? Can this new product, be legally marketed in this environment, and how does it impact the population as a whole? Not just the individual, not just the users that you intended to market to, but those non-users. And that has been a key point over the last, I want to say, 5 years, since 2018, when those initial numbers from the National Youth Tobacco Surveys have been coming out, where you'll see an increase of youth use in those in specific product categories. And so now that has played a key part in changing what the agency is looking for when it comes to the non-users. It's now the youth appeal. It's the youth marketing that is the target and the focal point in some of the, honestly, since 2018 and 2019, when those initial numbers came through. So, in my opinion, the reason why you would want a robust PMTA strategy, wherever you are in this process, if you've never submitted, if you have submitted, you're currently under the review process, or if you've resubmitted because you didn't meet all the requirements in acceptance or filing, or you've received a negative order. It's to demonstrate that you truly are serious about compliance, and that's not just for within your organization, but it's also for FDA to see that you're truly are committed to this process. And they can see by the type of PMTA that you submit. It's not a PMTA with maybe a couple of pages hitting all of the contents. It's actually in-depth information in each of the contents that they're asking you, and you've met all of the requirements. It's also the market access. I will spend some time to talk about it in the next couple of slides, but enforcement is real. It is not, I know that I've heard lots of things about, it's just these warning letters, it's just, it's just a small market share that they're going after, it's not truly the market. I look at it from a different lens, and so building a robust PMTA strategy will help maintain your market access. It's also to deal with any risk or challenges that come up through the PMTA review process. Having a fluid and adaptable strategy would allow you to address the changes in FDA requirements, FDA questions within your PMTA review process. You're able to kind of pivot and address the questions that they're asking if you have a built-in risk management process in your strategy. And it's also about brand reputation. I think Chris pointed out earlier about not having I think, in my opinion, FDA should have issued or listed out all of those PMTAs that are currently under review. But I'll be honest and say I think it's strategic in their part that they don't do that. I think they chose not to, in my opinion, they chose not to put that out there because they want the narrative to be there are only authorized products. And these are the only authorized products that can be on the market. And that's to not just speaking to manufacturers in the industry, but it's also to those retailers, to those distributors, and to those wholesalers, so that it kind of nugs, or it nudges at them on the compliance side of things. And so it falls back on, if you're not on some specified list, either state list or another, a list that a distributor or wholesaler has, it speaks to your brand reputation. If you can demonstrate that you have a robust PMTA strategy that you have submitted and you're currently under the review process, it speaks differently from when someone approaches a retailer or distributor that they want to place their product on the market, and they can't demonstrate that they have a PMTA strategy or a PMTA submitted, and they're still currently under review. So we'll go ahead and dive into the four pillars, in my opinion, that make up the strong, sound PMTA strategy. And again, this is addressing multiple stages within the PMTA process. It starts with knowing what's required of you, knowing what's in the Tobacco Control Act, what is required under 910 for a PMTA submission, so that you can make sure that you've checked those boxes. But now, it's moving forward, it's now what's required of you since the PMTA final rule that was issued in 2021. So this is that changing landscape that Chris talked about, that I'll be talking about, where a strategy will be key to this, because now you can re-pivot or refocus your strategy to address the newest and latest thing that the agency is focusing on, and making sure that you have met those. And if you have that foundation where you can check those boxes, it helps you ideally with responding to FDA decisions. If you find yourself in a situation where you didn't make it to the scientific review, and I know that others will be talking about the various processes within the PMTA, but if you find yourself not going through acceptance or filing, if you are standing on legal solid ground that you have done this, it's easier to challenge and appeal the agency and demonstrate to them, yes, I have. Yes, I have done that. My organization has provided this information. However it is, whatever format, if it's the wrong form or things of that nature, which the agency, I'll be honest and say that it doesn't take much to get an RTA and RTF, and they will look for any little thing to say, oh, you don't make it into scientific review. So don't give them that opportunity. Check that box, making sure that you have all of those covered. And then it will help you with making those decisions. Nope, went too far. All right, and then I'll talk about FDA enforcement here. I think FDA enforcement is real. I know that others may think differently because it's not on a grand scale, but I look at it from a different perspective. I look at it in the course of the last 4 years and where FDA has gone with enforcement. So since January of 2021, they've issued 650 or more than 650 warning letters to manufacturers for specific 910 violation, failure to have a marketing authorization. In addition, they've issued over 35 civil money penalties, and that is as of October of 2021. And injunctions as well. They've issued 7 injunctions to manufacturers since October of 2021. And I would say that since January of 2021, the number of warning letters has increased. But now what you see is that the additional enforcement tools are being applied, and that the agency is looking to move from the warning letter to the next enforcement action, which is civil money penalties, injunctions, and which could eventually lead to seizures. I will also say that in addition to what's happening domestically, there's a lot of import activity that is happening over the last year that was not happening in 2020, 21, 22, and it has taken an upshift in 2023. So as of October of this year, there were over 340 refusals of individual shipments that FDA has refused to allow refused admission into the U.S. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but prior to 2020, fiscal year 2023, the Agency for Tobacco Products as a whole was running about 100 refusals a year. We're talking 4 months, 340. And I know that's a drop in the bucket, but tobacco products is very small compared to medical devices. It's about 1% of what FDA reviews at the ports. But what I see in that is a trend that they understand that these products, especially the illegal and illicit products, are coming from outside the U.S. And they need to attack, which in my opinion, this is doing enforcement for a very long time, that's their first line of defense, is the ports. And they need to step up what they're actually doing at the ports, and they have the tools in place. It's taken them longer than I would actually like to see, and I think as responsible manufacturers, it's taking them a little bit longer than you would like them to see, because if you have to share real estate at a retailer or talk to a distributor who's currently you're competing with those that have not submitted a PMTA, and you have submitted a PMTA, and you have committed to that, it's not fair to you. It is not fair to those retailers and those distributors, because now they put themselves in jeopardy of potential compliance actions and warning letters and so on and so forth. So that's my spill on enforcement. I can talk about it for a very long time, but I know I'm only supposed to be talking about PMTA, so I'll move on. All righty. So a big portion of the application is the scientific foundation, and so there are two pieces to that, and that is. We got 2 pieces to that, and that's the non-clinical testing, and that's the clinical testing. And so what the agency wants to see is they want you to provide them the potential health risks that you present to the users of your products, as well as to the non-users. They want you to provide, to tell them about your product. Give us your testing. Tell us what's your ingredients. Tell us your safety profile. Is there a potential that your products are not stable? How long are your products stable? Are there any potential extractables or toxicological chemicals that are released from your products at a certain time? So they want you to provide them this risk assessment of your product so that they can evaluate if this product is appropriate for the protection of public health. On the clinical side, on the human study side, we've seen that change over the last couple of years, where it's been standard, it's abuse liability, and how users will actually use your product, and the perception and intention studies, and that's testing your labeling, making sure that users and non-users, how they perceive your products. But as of lately, or as of recent, there have been a shift. There were the guidance that was issued in 2019, where it talked about additional risk and benefit studies that could be done. It talked about randomized controlled studies, controlled trials, and longitudinal cohort trials. And these are trials testing the switching, evaluating whether the users that are currently your intended users of your product, what's the likelihood that they would switch, either dual use or switch to your product compared to using cigarettes. And since the TCA, this is, as it was written in the TCA, this was something that was an optional. There was a component where you can do literature reviews, and you can provide published literature and specifically about switching studies and the likelihood that users would switch to your product category. But as of recent now, they utilize this as a marketing denial order reason, and that they would like to see this in their PMTA. They would like to see switching studies in your PMTA. So this is where having a robust strategy, understanding that you need to pivot when the agency has a policy change. And you can also challenge the agency on those decisions as well, and that's why legal is important, on those changing landscapes or changing requirements when they're moving or policy changes are in place where they want to make certain decisions. But this is as of recent. The switching study is something that has been of high focus to the agency as they review specific product categories, and that's mostly ends, products, flavored ends. I guess the key point here is develop a robust product and clinical testing plan. I did have a couple of things on that. When you're developing your testing plan and you're working with whomever you've decided as far as your laboratories, it's keen to get a laboratory that knows what they're doing, that they're accredited laboratory. And when I say accredited, it could be ISO 17025, or that they have demonstrated that they have validated their methods. They have verified and validated the methods that they're providing you to submit in your PMTA. Because at the end of the day, you're responsible for your PMTA, so you want to make sure that those that you're entrusting with testing your product, that they know what they're doing and that they're accredited. And that if there are any questions about testing, through the PMTA review process, that they would be able to answer those questions in a timely manner to the agency. So manufacturing process. So this is an area that I am quite familiar with, and the expectation that the agency, what they would like to see in your manufacturing section is that you can consistently manufacture your product from whatever specs you've provided to the agency. You can consistently manufacture that product at any volume, at any production volume, and that if there are any out of specs or non-conformance in your manufacturing process, that you have controls in place to catch that, to catch it before it goes to the next phase of production, to catch it before it reaches the users, that it's not distributed into the US. They want you to demonstrate that through documentation within the PMTA process, but they also want you to demonstrate that when they go on inspection. So if you're not aware, FDA goes out on PMTA inspections, and what they would like to see is that you can manufacture your product based on what you've provided to the agency in your documentation. That as you've provided those specifications, that is their expectation, is what they will see when they go out and inspect your product. And that the controls that you've provided to them, as far as your incoming QC, your in-processing QC, your batch release processing, your testing, as far as verifying your C of A's, that you are actually doing that at whatever facility it is. And I say that because I've seen where some applications, other sections, scientific section is well supported, however, the manufacturing section is not. And I will say that this is an area, and I'll talk about it in my next slide, this is an area where the agency strategically will be looking to in the next year or two for their marketing denials. And I could see the framework, I could see their minds and their work as far as how they are moving forward with their current unified agenda. But they want to see validation, they want to see, in addition to the documentation, they want to see that the process is consistently met to your specifications. They also want to see environmental impact for your product. So it's not just about who's using your product, it's the impact that you have on the environment where you manufacture your product. That's air, that's waste, and that's water, that's disposal. They want to make sure that you have controls in place to make sure that you're not impacting the environmental climate, and that you are not presenting any additional harm to the environment. So creating your strategy, developing the manufacturing process, so one, you're ready for inspection, but you're also ready for any questions that the agency may have to that. So if you've not heard, this will be fair warning. Last year, the agency issued a proposed rule for the tobacco product manufacturing practices. And that was of March of 2023. The comment period closed in October. Looking at the current FDA unified agenda, as well as the CTP strategic plan, tobacco product manufacturing practices was top to that list. It is in their anticipated timeline to be issued November of 2024. And just as a side note, when there's an election year, there's a specific window in which rules can be promulgated and final rules can be issued. To give the courtesy to, if there is a new administration, to give them courtesy to not issue rules in a transition period so that they have the opportunity to review and determine if they agree with such ruling, with such rules and regulations. So the tobacco product manufacturing practices applies to all products, all tobacco products currently under the jurisdiction. There will be certain parts of the rule that do not apply to those products that are known as grandfathered, or now it's known as pre-existing tobacco products. There are some parts of that of the rule that won't apply to them, but it covers all products. And it's just for foreign and domestic manufacturers, both tobacco manufacturers and then bulk manufacturers. And when I look at this, when I looked at the rule, a couple things came to mind. It's that other things need to come into play for this rule to be effective and for them to enforce this. First of all, the agency does not have a registration listing for foreign manufacturers. So in order to have a listing of foreign manufacturers, they have to promulgate the registration and listing rule. But this would require inspections for foreign and domestic manufacturers. Not just for the PMTA process, those biannual inspections that domestic manufacturers are accustomed to, it would also be applying to foreign manufacturers. For those spec developers who just develop your specifications, these rules will apply to them. All of your contract manufacturers, these rules apply to them. Importers as well, because you are a manufacturer of a product, because you're not manufacturing domestically, you're the importer of record, you're the manufacturer of record according to the agency's definition of a manufacturer. Who will it indirectly impact? Your suppliers, because the agency is asking you to have control over your suppliers and develop supplier qualification programs for each of your suppliers. So now you have to have communication with your suppliers and ask them for information that you might not have already have had in your process already. Your distributors, your contract testing laboratories, all of these would be indirectly impacted. The timeline is unique, is something that I talked about before. March of 2023, my thought process would be at the earliest, this would be November 2024. It may be 2025. What does that mean as far as compliance period? So for those manufacturers who have greater than 350 employees, that's a 2-year compliance period. That's 2 years to comply with these requirements. And the expectation is that inspections will be according to the TPMP requirements shortly after the 2-year timeline. So that's for larger manufacturers, 350. For those that are less than 350, it's November of 2030. So you get 6 years. It's 4 years additional to the 2 years that are in the compliance period. The agency would like to, and this is in my opinion, would like to use manufacturing as a reason for denying your application. And I think that's the reason, in my opinion, that's the reason why there is a push to put TPMP out forward, because it's, for many of you who've submitted a PMTA, you've complied with a lot of the quality management systems, but this would be creating a standardized approach to all the manufacturing and a standardized approach to your documentation. So I would pay close attention to this and the timeline for this. So the fourth pillar, and it's definitely not the least, is your marketing plan. And building a marketing plan is not something that is set in stone and is static. It is something that should be fluid, because this is a tightly regulated requirement as far as marketing restrictions goes. It's also not just your labeling, but it includes your labeling. Your marketing plan covers labeling, advertising, any media in which you plan to market your product. If you plan to have a website, making sure that your website complies to the agent ID requirements. And with those agent ID requirements, it's not just entering your the information, it's also verified by third-party information, third-party government information. So spending time with your marketing plan, it is key. Understanding that this is a fluid plan and that there will be, as we've seen with the agency, there's a change in what they would like to see or restrictions that they've applied in the recent marketing granted orders. There is a commitment from the applicants to not use social influencers of certain ages. Those cartoon depictions, fruits, any food imitating, all of that encompassing in your labeling and advertising, as well as your predictions for year 1 through 5. And those are estimates, and the agency knows those are estimates, but they want to see that you have controls in place in your plan. If you're using retailers, how will you ensure that they are following age and ID? If you have some responsibility with any distributor advertising, that you have the ability to review and provide comment on any of those. So all of the 4 pillars, I'll stress, is not to be developed in silo. They need to work together to understand how each interlock with each other. Specifically, I'll give some examples. When it comes to marketing, everything that you're providing in your marketing plan should run through legal. You should make sure that your labeling and your advertising, that your warning statements comply with the requirements, that you make sure that all of your advertising, that you don't have any specific claims or you're not overstepping where the agency has already made decisions on some of those marketing tools. Your manufacturing directly impacts science. If how you manufacture your product leads to testing that shows that there are some issues with your product, either the stability of your product, your shelf life of your product, that impacts how you manufacture, and you have to feed that right back. So all of this, all of the 4 pillars interlock with each other, they play together, and they help each other as far as mitigating any risks that may come through a PMTA review process. And so the strategy itself is fluid, and they should all work together. And so here are my tips as I'm closing out. When you're developing a strategy, and I'm pretty sure all of you have heard this before, but it's important with the PMTA because you're dealing with compliance here. And it is an organizational commitment. It is top down, bottom up. From your production line all the way to the CEO should understand the commitment that we're all here to comply to the PMTA requirements, and that there are changing requirements, and that everyone is on the same page of that. Cross-functional collaboration, understanding that as you develop those 4 pillars and the strategy in the 4 pillars, that they understand what each is doing, and that if there is a current challenge or risk that's being addressed by marketing, that it's also something that manufacturing is aware of, that is also that science is aware of, so that everyone is understanding where the risks lie and that we're all bought in. And sometimes you can get different perspectives from different departments. We've talked about risk assessment and mitigation. You also want to be ahead of the game of any mitigating any risk that may come up through this process. PMTA, at this rate, we're looking at, and I chuckle, maybe 4 or 5 years to move through scientific review, and that's, from my opinion, that's unsatisfactory. It is, but that's on another topic here. Engaging external experts. There's a lot of information that the industry, specifically on the science side, as well as innovation, as well as legal, there's a lot of information that is current and ongoing that's being released, and scientists are developing new research, new risks that may be specific to your product category. Engaging with those external consultants and legal experts so that you understand going in where the risks lie with your PMTA, and that if you choose to go one way versus another, you understand what's in front of you and the challenges that you may get from FDA through deficiency or through a negative order. Being flexible and adapting to change. I think this is going to be the theme over the next couple of years. I'm optimistic that things will change again, because at this stage we have no marketing authorization over the last 2 years specifically, and that's I think that impacts enforcement, that impacts the illegal and the illicit trade markets, and it's also impacting the public health standard as a whole. These products that are illicit and have not submitted PMTAs, there are consequences to use of this. And the agency has seen this with EVALI. It's not specifically, EVALI was not tobacco products, but it is what happens when products are potentially contaminated or they have not gone through a regulatory process where you don't know what's in those products. So I think adapting to the change in the regulatory landscape is something that you want to build into your strategy. Staying informed and updated. FDA puts out information almost every other day, if it's in the form of a warning letter, if it's in form of a marketing decision, if there are announcements on what they're thinking, stuff about their ruling, their strategic plan. In each of those key announcements, there are key things to keep an eye on. Where they're going, where they're headed, you can almost always see with what they announce to the public, the direction in which they're probably 2 or 3 steps ahead. And that's why I spoke about the manufacturing practices. So thank you.